If I close my eyes, I can still remember the way the morning sunlight danced across our kitchen table, the way my husband's laughter filled the room as he sipped his coffee, and the way I felt safe, loved, and certain that our life together was exactly as it should be. That morning, I woke up with a flutter of excitement in my chest, the kind that comes from knowing you're about to do something special for someone you love. I wanted to surprise him, to remind him, and maybe myself, of the magic that first brought us together. It had been a while since we'd done anything spontaneous. Life, as it tends to do, had gotten busy. Work deadlines, bills, family obligations, and the endless cycle of laundry and grocery lists had slowly edged out the little moments of romance we used to cherish. But today I was determined to change that. Today, I would show him that I still saw him, still loved him, and still believed in us. I spent the morning carefully choosing the perfect gift, a leather-bound journal, embossed with his initials, something he'd mentioned wanting months ago, but never bought for himself. I tucked a handwritten note inside the front cover, a simple message. For all the dreams we haven't written yet, I love you. I wrapped it in crisp navy paper and tied it with a silver ribbon, my hands trembling with anticipation. As I got ready, I found myself smiling at the memory of our first date, how he'd shown up with a single daisy and a nervous grin, how we'd talked for hours about everything and nothing. I thought about the vows we'd exchanged, the promises whispered in the quiet of our bedroom, the laughter and the tears we'd shared. I wanted to bring some of that back, to remind us both of the foundation we'd built. I checked the time just enough to catch him before his lunch break. I imagined the look of surprise on his face when he saw me standing in the lobby, gift in hand. Maybe we'd sneak away for a quick lunch, just the two of us, like we used to before life got so complicated. Maybe this would be the spark we needed to reignite the connection that had started to feel a little faded around the edges. Driving to his office, I rehearsed what I'd say. Would I be playful? Guess who's here to steal you away for lunch? Or maybe sentimental? I just wanted to remind you how much you mean to me. I pictured his co-workers smiling, maybe even a little envious of our love. I wanted to be the wife who did sweet things, the wife who still believed in romance, even after all these years. The city buzzed around me as I navigated traffic, my heart beating a little faster with every mile. I thought about how lucky I was, how grateful I felt for the life we'd built together. Sure, we'd had our ups and downs, what marriage didn't, but I believed in us. I believed that love was something you chose, every day, even when it wasn't easy. As I pulled into the parking lot, I took a deep breath and checked my reflection in the rearview mirror. I wanted everything to be perfect. I smoothed my hair, reapplied my lipstick, and practiced my smile. I could almost hear his voice in my head, teasing me for fussing over the little things. But I wanted this moment to matter. I wanted him to know that he was still worth the effort. I gathered the gift, my purse, and my courage, and stepped out of the car. The building loomed ahead, glass and steel gleaming in the midday sun. I felt a rush of nerves. What if he was busy? What if he was in a meeting? But I pushed the doubts aside. Today was about us, about making time for each other, about choosing love in the middle of the chaos. As I walked toward the entrance, I replayed the last few weeks in my mind. He'd seemed distracted lately, a little distant, but I'd chalked it up to work stress. We'd both been tired, both a little short-tempered, but I believed that every marriage went through seasons like this. I believed that love was resilient, that it could weather storms if you tended to it. I reached the revolving doors and paused, my hand resting on the cool metal. I took one last deep breath, feeling the weight of hope and anticipation settle in my chest. I imagined the story we'd tell our friends later, how I'd surprised him at work, how he'd swept me into his arms, how we'd laughed and stolen a few precious moments together in the middle of an ordinary day. If only I'd known what was waiting for me behind those doors. If only I'd known that the life I thought I knew was about to unravel, thread by thread, until nothing was left but questions and heartbreak. But in that moment, all I felt was hope. All I saw was the man I loved, waiting for me on the other side of the glass, and the future I still believed we shared. With my heart pounding and my gift clutched tightly in my hands, I stepped inside. ready to surprise my husband and completely unprepared for the truth that was about to shatter everything I thought I knew. The lobby was cool and bright, filled with the low hum of conversation and the rhythmic tapping of heels on polished tile. I paused for a moment, letting my eyes adjust to the light, the gift still clutched in my hands. The receptionist's desk was just ahead, a sleek island of order in the middle of the bustling entrance. I approached with a smile, feeling a flutter of nerves, part excitement, part the awkwardness of being somewhere I didn't quite belong. "Hi there," I said, my voice cheerful. "I'm here to see Daniel Carter. I'm his wife." The receptionist, a young woman with perfectly styled hair and a practiced smile, glanced up from her computer. For a split second, her expression flickered, something unreadable passing across her face. Then she returned my smile, but it felt a little forced, a little too polite. "Oh," she said, her fingers pausing over the keyboard. "You're his wife?" I nodded, a little thrown by her hesitation. "Yes, I wanted to surprise him. Is he in?" She hesitated, glancing at a clipboard, then back at me. Just a moment." She picked up the phone, dialing an extension. "Hi, it's Emily at reception. There's someone here to see Daniel. She says she's his wife." She listened, her eyes flicking to me, then away. "Okay, thank you." She set the phone down, her smile returning, but now it was tinged with something else, uncertainty, maybe even discomfort. "I'm sorry, Mrs. Carter," I supplied, my own smile faltering. "Anna Carter." She nodded, but her eyes darted to the hallway behind her. "Of course, it's just that, well, Mrs. Carter is already upstairs. Did you want to leave something for Mr. Carter, or—" For a moment, I thought I'd misheard her. The words didn't make sense, didn't fit into the reality I'd carried with me all morning. "I'm sorry, what did you say?" She looked genuinely uncomfortable now, her hands fidgeting with a stack of papers. "I just meant, Mrs. Carter signed in about 20 minutes ago. She's with Mr. Carter in his office." A cold wave of confusion washed over me, chilling the excitement that had carried me here. "But I'm Mrs. Carter," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. The receptionist's eyes widened, and she leaned in, lowering her voice. "I'm so sorry, That's what she said. She comes in sometimes. I assumed—" She stopped, biting her lip. "Would you like me to call up again?" I nodded, my mind racing. There had to be some mistake. Maybe it was a client or a colleague with the same last name. Maybe Daniel had mentioned me, and someone was playing a harmless joke. But as I stood there, the certainty I'd felt all morning began to unravel, replaced by a gnawing sense of unease. Emily picked up the phone again, her voice hushed. "Hi, it's Emily. I have another Mrs. Carter here." "Yes, she says she's his wife." "No, not the one upstairs." "Yes, I'm sure." She listened, her eyes darting to me, then away. "Okay, thank you." She hung up, her face pale. "Mr. Carter will be down in a moment. Would you like to have a seat?" I shook my head, unable to move. My heart pounded in my chest, each beat echoing with questions I couldn't yet form. I glanced around the lobby, suddenly hyper-aware of the curious glances from people passing by. Did they know something I didn't? Was I the punchline to a joke I didn't understand? Minutes stretched into an eternity. I tried to steady my breathing, tried to convince myself that this was all a misunderstanding. Maybe Daniel had a client who liked to joke around. Maybe there was a mix-up with the sign-in sheet. But the receptionist's discomfort, the way she avoided my eyes, told me otherwise. Finally, the elevator doors slid open with a soft chime, and Daniel stepped out. He looked surprised to see me, his eyes flicking from my face to the gift in my hands, then to the receptionist. For a moment, he just stood there, as if trying to decide how to react. "Anna," he said, forcing a smile. "What are you doing here?" I tried to keep my voice steady. "I wanted to surprise you. But apparently, I'm not the only Mrs. Carter in the building today." His smile faltered, and I saw something flicker in his eyes, fear, maybe, or guilt. "It's just a misunderstanding," he said quickly. "Let's go upstairs and talk." I followed him to the elevator, my mind spinning. The ride was silent, the air thick with tension. I clutched the gift tighter, the ribbon digging into my palm. I wanted to ask him what was going on, but the words caught in my throat. When we reached his floor, he led me down a hallway lined with framed photos and awards. I tried to focus on the details, anything to distract myself from the dread building inside me. We stopped outside his office, and he hesitated before opening the door. Inside, the space was neat and orderly, just as I remembered. But something was different. On his desk, next to his computer, was a silver picture frame. I moved closer, my breath catching in my chest. It was a photo of Daniel, smiling with his arm around a woman I'd never seen before. She was beautiful, her hand resting possessively on his chest, her eyes shining with happiness. The frame was engraved, "To my darling husband, forever yours, Emily." I stared at the photo, my mind refusing to process what I was seeing. The room seemed to tilt, the air growing thin. I turned to Daniel, searching his face for answers, for reassurance, for anything that would make this make sense. He opened his mouth to speak, but I barely heard him. My world was spinning, the foundation of my marriage crumbling beneath my feet. I thought it was a simple mistake, until I saw her photo on his desk, and realized that nothing would ever be the same again. For a moment, I just stood there, staring at the photo on Daniel's desk, my mind refusing to accept what my eyes were telling me. The woman in the picture was beautiful, poised, and utterly unfamiliar. Her smile was radiant, her hand resting on Daniel's chest as if she belonged there. The words engraved on the frame, "To my darling husband, forever yours, Emily," echoed in my mind, each syllable a hammer blow to my heart. I turned to Daniel, my voice trembling. "Who is she?" He hesitated, glancing at the closed door as if hoping for an escape. "Anna, please, let's talk about this somewhere private." But I couldn't move. My feet felt rooted to the floor, my hands shaking as I clutched the gift I'd brought for him, a symbol of the love I thought we shared, now feeling like a cruel joke. "Who is she, Daniel?" I demanded, louder this time, my voice cracking. He ran a hand through his hair, his eyes darting around the room. "It's not what you think. She's a colleague. We work closely together. And sometimes, for business reasons, it's easier if people think we're married. It's just a front, Anna. It doesn't mean anything." I stared at him, disbelief warring with the desperate hope that he was telling the truth. "A front? You let people believe you're married to someone else? Why would you do that?" He sighed, frustration creeping into his voice. "It's complicated. Some of our clients are old-fashioned. They like dealing with married couples. It's just easier this way. I didn't want to worry you." I shook my head, the explanation feeling flimsy and absurd. "You didn't want to worry me? Daniel, you have a picture of her on your desk. You let her sign in as your wife. How long has this been going on?" Before he could answer, the door opened and the woman from the photo stepped inside. She was even more striking in person, tall, with dark hair pulled into a sleek ponytail, dressed in a tailored suit that spoke of confidence and success. She stopped short when she saw me, her eyes narrowing slightly as she took in the scene. "Oh," she said, her voice cool and measured. "I didn't realize you had company, Daniel." He cleared his throat, his discomfort palpable. "Emily, this is Anna, my wife." Emily's gaze flicked over me, assessing, calculating. She extended a perfectly manicured hand. "It's nice to finally meet you, Anna. I've heard so much about you." I ignored her hand, my anger simmering just beneath the surface. "Have you? Because I haven't heard a single thing about you." She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Daniel and I work very closely. Sometimes in this business, appearances matter more than reality. I'm sure you understand." I bristled at her tone, the implication that I was naive or out of touch. "No, I don't understand. I don't understand why my husband needs to pretend to be married to someone else. I don't understand why he never mentioned you, or why you're signing in as Mrs. Carter." Daniel stepped between us, his hands raised in a placating gesture. "Please, can we not do this here? Anna, let's go home and talk. Emily, can you give us a moment?" But Emily didn't move. She crossed her arms, her expression hardening. "I think Anna deserves to know the truth, Daniel. She deserves to know how much you've sacrificed for this company, for your career. She deserves to know how much pressure you've been under." I looked at Daniel, searching his face for any sign of remorse, any hint of the man I thought I knew. "Is that true? Is this about your job? Or is there something else going on?" He hesitated, and in that moment, I saw the answer in his eyes. There was more, so much more that he wasn't telling me. Emily stepped closer, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. You're not the first wife to be kept in the dark, Anna. Men like Daniel, they do what they have to do to get ahead. Sometimes that means making sacrifices. Sometimes that means telling little white lies. I felt a surge of anger, hot and blinding. Don't talk to me like I'm stupid. I know what a lie looks like. I just never thought I'd see it in my own marriage. Daniel reached for my hand, but I pulled away, the hurt too raw, too fresh. Anna, please. I never meant for you to find out like this. I was going to tell you, I swear, I didn't know how. I laughed, the sound brittle and sharp. You didn't know how? How about the truth, Daniel? How about treating me like your wife, instead of a prop you can hide behind when it's convenient? Emily watched us, her expression unreadable. Maybe you should go, Anna. This isn't the place for a scene. I rounded on her, my voice shaking with fury. You don't get to tell me what to do. You don't get to play the wife in my husband's life and then act like I'm the problem. She shrugged, unbothered. I'm just doing my job. If you have a problem with that, take it up with Daniel. The room felt suffocating, the walls closing in around me. I looked at Daniel, desperate for him to say something, to do something that would make this nightmare end. But he just stood there, silent and ashamed. I turned to leave, my hands trembling. As I reached the door, Emily called after me, her voice soft but cutting. For what it's worth, Anna, I'm not the enemy here. Sometimes, the people closest to us are the ones who hurt us the most. Her words echoed in my mind as I stumbled down the hallway, my vision blurred with tears. I barely registered the curious glances from Daniel's co-workers, the sympathetic looks from the receptionist as I passed. All I could think about was the woman in the photo, the woman who had taken my place in my husband's life, if only for a few hours each day. I reached the elevator and pressed the button with shaking hands, my heart pounding in my chest. As the doors slid shut, I caught a glimpse of Daniel standing in the hallway, his shoulders slumped in defeat. I wanted to scream, to demand answers, to make sense of the chaos that had just exploded in my life. But all I could do was ride the elevator down. The gift I'd brought for Daniel still clutched in my hands, a painful reminder of the love I thought we shared, now tainted by lies and betrayal. When I reached the lobby, I paused, struggling to catch my breath. The receptionist looked up, her eyes filled with pity. I wanted to ask her what she knew, how long this had been going on, but the words wouldn't come. I felt exposed, humiliated, like a stranger in my own life. Outside, the city moved on as if nothing had happened. Cars honked, people hurried past, oblivious to the storm raging inside me. I stood on the sidewalk, the world spinning around me, and tried to make sense of what I'd just learned. But the truth was even worse than I imagined, because as I replayed the confrontation in my mind, I realized that this wasn't just about a lie at work or a photo on a desk. This was about trust, about the foundation of my marriage, about the person I thought I knew better than anyone else in the world. And as the first tears slipped down my cheeks, I knew that nothing would ever be the same again. I didn't go home right away. I wandered the city for hours, the gift still in my hands, my mind replaying every word, every look, every lie. I tried to remember the last time Daniel and I had truly talked, really talked, not just about bills or schedules or what to have for dinner. I tried to remember the last time I'd felt like his wife, not just a fixture in the background of his life. By the time I finally walked through our front door, the sun was setting, painting the sky in bruised shades of purple and gold. Daniel was already home, sitting at the kitchen table with his head in his hands. He looked up when I entered, his eyes red-rimmed and tired. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The silence between us was thick, heavy with everything that had gone unsaid for far too long. I set the gift down on the counter, the ribbon now crumpled and sad. We need to talk, I said, my voice steady despite the storm raging inside me. He nodded but didn't meet my eyes. Anna, I'm sorry. I never wanted you to find out like that. I pulled out a chair and sat across from him, folding my hands in my lap to keep them from shaking. Then how did you want me to find out, Daniel? Or were you planning to keep lying to me forever? He winced, rubbing his temples. It's not like that. I told you it's just for work. Emily and I, there's nothing between us. It's all for appearances. I shook my head, anger flaring. Don't insult me. You let her sign in as your wife. You have a picture of her on your desk. You let everyone at your office believe she's your wife. How is that just for appearances? He looked up at me, desperation in his eyes. You don't understand the pressure I'm under. My boss expects me to play along. Some of our biggest clients are old-fashioned. They trust married couples more. Emily and I, we're just giving them what they want. I stared at him, searching for any sign of the man I married. So you're telling me you've been living a double life for your job? That you've let another woman take my place, even if it's just at work? Do you have any idea how that feels? He reached for my hand, but I pulled away, the hurt too raw. Anna, please. I never meant to hurt you. I was going to tell you. I didn't know how. I laughed, the sound bitter. You didn't know how? How about the truth, Daniel? How about treating me like your partner instead of someone you have to hide things from? He shook his head, his voice pleading. It's not like that. I love you. You're my wife. Emily means nothing to me outside of work. I felt tears prick at my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. Then why does it feel like she's the one you're protecting? Why does it feel like I'm the outsider in my own marriage? He stood up, pacing the kitchen. You're not. Anna, please, you have to believe me. This is just a role I have to play. It's not real. I watched him, my heart breaking. It's real enough for her to have a framed photo on your desk. It's real enough for the receptionist to look at me like I'm the imposter. How long has this been going on, Daniel? How many other lies have you told me? He stopped, his shoulders slumping. A few months, maybe longer. I didn't want to worry you. I thought I could handle it. I shook my head, my voice trembling. You thought you could handle it? Or you thought I'd never find out? He looked at me, his eyes pleading. Anna, please. Don't make this into something it's not. I swear there's nothing between me and Emily. It's just business. I stood up, my hands clenched at my sides. You keep saying that, but you're not listening to me. You broke my trust, Daniel. You made me feel invisible. Do you have any idea what that does to a person? He moved toward me, his voice desperate. I'm sorry. I'll fix this. I'll talk to my boss. I'll take the photo down. I'll make sure Emily never signs in as my wife again. Just, please don't tell anyone. Don't make a scene at work. I could lose everything. His words hit me like a slap. So that's what you care about? Your job, your reputation? What about me, Daniel? What about our marriage? He reached for me again, but I stepped back, the distance between us suddenly feeling insurmountable. Anna, please. I'm begging you. Don't tell anyone. I'll fix it, I promise. Just give me a chance. I looked at him, really looked at him, and saw the fear in his eyes, not fear of losing me, but fear of losing the life he'd built, the image he'd so carefully constructed. I realized then that I was alone in my pain, that the man I thought I knew was a stranger, willing to sacrifice my trust for his own convenience. He begged me not to tell anyone, but I needed the truth. And I knew in that moment that I would do whatever it took to find it, no matter how much it hurt. That night, I lay awake in the darkness, staring at the ceiling, my mind racing with questions that refused to be silenced. Daniel slept fitfully beside me, his breaths uneven, but I couldn't close my eyes. I kept replaying every conversation, every late night at the office, every unexplained business trip. The more I thought about it, the more I realized how many little things I'd brushed aside. How many times I'd chosen to trust him instead of trusting my own instincts. By morning, something inside me had shifted. I was done waiting for answers. If Daniel wouldn't give me the truth, I would find it myself. I started with his phone. He'd always been careful, never leaving it unattended. But that morning, as he showered, he left it charging on his nightstand. My hands shook as I picked it up, my heart pounding in my chest. I told myself I was only looking for reassurance, for proof that this was all just a misunderstanding. But deep down, I knew I was searching for something else, confirmation of the betrayal I already felt in my bones. His messages were mostly work-related, but I noticed a string of texts from Emily. They were friendly, sometimes playful, but nothing overtly romantic. Still, there was an intimacy in their exchanges, a familiarity that made my stomach twist. I scrolled further back, my breath catching as I found a series of late-night messages, inside jokes, shared frustrations, even a few photos of the two of them at company events, smiling like a couple. I put the phone down, my hands clammy. I felt sick, but I couldn't stop. I needed to know how deep this went. Next, I turned to our finances. Daniel had always handled the bills, the investments, the taxes. I'd trusted him to take care of us, never questioning the bank statements or the credit card bills that arrived each month. But now, every line item felt suspicious, every unexplained withdrawal a potential clue. I logged into our joint account, my fingers trembling as I scrolled through months of transactions. At first, everything seemed normal: groceries, utilities, the occasional dinner out. But then I noticed a series of large cash withdrawals, always on Fridays, always just before Daniel's supposed business dinners. There were charges at expensive restaurants I'd never heard of, hotel stays in the city, gifts from high-end boutiques. My heart pounded as I realized how much money had slipped through my fingers, how many secrets had been hidden in plain sight. I printed out the statements, highlighting every suspicious charge, every unexplained expense. The evidence was piling up, but I still needed more. I remembered the company events Daniel had attended, the ones I'd been too busy or too tired to join. I searched his email for invitations, RSVPs, anything that might tell me who else had been there. I found photos posted on the company's internal site, Daniel and Emily, always side by side, laughing together, their body language unmistakably close. In one, Emily's hand rested on Daniel's arm, her head tilted toward him as if sharing a secret. In another, they posed together in front of a banner that read, "Carter and Associates, Building the Future Together." I stared at the images, my anger growing. How many people at his office knew about this? How many had smiled at me at company parties, all the while knowing that I was the outsider, the one left in the dark? I dug deeper, searching for anything that might explain why Daniel had gone to such lengths to keep me out of his work life. I found a folder on his laptop labeled Personal, hidden among spreadsheets and presentations. Inside were scanned copies of documents, contracts, NDAs, even a second lease agreement for an apartment downtown. My breath caught as I realized what I was looking at. Daniel had another place, a space I'd never seen, paid for with money I'd never noticed missing. I copied the address, my hands shaking. I needed to see it for myself. That afternoon, I drove to the address listed on the lease. The building was modern, with a doorman and a lobby that smelled of fresh flowers. I felt out of place as I waited for the elevator, my heart pounding in my chest. When I reached the right floor, I found the apartment easily. Daniel's name was on the mailbox, right next to Emily's. I stood in the hallway, staring at the names, my mind reeling. This wasn't just a work arrangement. This was a life he'd built without me, a world I'd never been invited into. I didn't have a key, but I waited, hoping for a glimpse of the truth. After nearly an hour, I saw Emily step out of the elevator, her arms full of groceries. She didn't see me at first, but when she did, her eyes widened in surprise. "Anna," she said, her voice tight, "what are you doing here?" I forced myself to stay calm. "I could ask you the same thing." "Is this your apartment?" She hesitated, then nodded. "It's complicated." I laughed, the sound hollow. "That seems to be the word of the week." She shifted the bags in her arms, her expression guarded. "Look, I don't know what Daniel's told you, but this isn't what you think." I shook my head, my anger boiling over. "No? Because it looks like you and my husband have been living a double life. It looks like you've been playing house while I've been at home, waiting for him to come back to me." Emily's face softened, just for a moment. "Anna, I'm not trying to hurt you. Daniel and we're not having an affair, if that's what you think. But we are partners. In business and sometimes for appearances in life. It's what the job demands." I stared at her, disbelief warring with exhaustion. "So you're telling me this is all for work? The apartment, the dinners, the money?" She nodded, but I saw something flicker in her eyes, doubt, maybe, or guilt. "It started that way. But sometimes things get blurry. Lines get crossed. I'm sorry." I turned away, unable to look at her. "You should be." I left the building, my mind spinning with everything I'd learned. Every secret I uncovered led to another, darker truth. Daniel hadn't just lied to me, he'd built an entire life on those lies. A life that didn't include me. As I drove home, I realized I couldn't trust anything he said. I needed to know everything, no matter how much it hurt. And I knew, deep down, that the worst was still to come. The days that followed blurred together, each one heavier than the last. I moved through them like a ghost, haunted by the weight of everything I'd discovered. The world outside kept spinning, cars honked, neighbors waved, the sun rose and set, but inside, I was unraveling. I tried to reach out, desperate for comfort, for someone to tell me I wasn't losing my mind. But the more I tried to explain, the more alone I felt. I called my sister first, my voice trembling as I told her about Daniel, about Emily, about the apartment and the lies. She listened in silence, then sighed. "Anna, are you sure you're not overreacting? Maybe it really is just for work. You know how competitive his industry is. Maybe you're reading too much into it." Her words stung, but I tried again, calling my oldest friend, Rachel. She'd always been my confidant, the one I could count on for honesty. But even she hesitated. "I mean, it sounds weird, but Daniel's always seemed so devoted to you. Are you sure you're not just stressed? Maybe you two need a vacation." Sometimes people get caught up in their own heads. I hung up, feeling the walls close in. I tried my mother next, hoping for the unconditional support only a parent can give. But she just tutted, her voice gentle but dismissive. "Marriage is hard, sweetheart. Men do foolish things sometimes, but that doesn't mean he doesn't love you. Maybe you should talk to him, really talk. Don't let your imagination run wild." Each conversation left me more isolated, more convinced that I was the problem. Maybe I was too sensitive, too suspicious. Maybe I'd driven Daniel away with my questions, my need for reassurance. I replayed every argument, every moment of doubt, searching for the place where I'd gone wrong. At night, the silence in our house was deafening. Daniel moved through the rooms like a shadow, careful, distant, always on his phone or his laptop. When I tried to talk, he'd sigh, his patience thin. "Anna, I told you, it's not what you think. Can't you just trust me?" But trust was a luxury I no longer had. I watched him, searching for signs of the man I'd married, but all I saw was a stranger, someone who could lie to my face and sleep soundly beside me. I stopped reaching out. I stopped answering calls, stopped replying to texts. I couldn't bear the pity in my friends' voices, the skepticism in my family's questions. I started to believe what they said, that I was overreacting, that I was making something out of nothing. But the ache in my chest told me otherwise. I went through the motions of daily life, but everything felt hollow. I'd stand in the shower, letting the water run over me, hoping it would wash away the shame, the doubt, the heartbreak. I'd stare at my reflection, searching for the woman I used to be, the woman who believed in love, in loyalty, in herself. But she was gone, replaced by someone brittle and uncertain. I stopped sleeping. I'd lie awake, staring at the ceiling, replaying every moment of my marriage, every red flag I'd ignored. I wondered if Daniel had ever really loved me, or if I'd just been convenient, a role to fill, a box to check. I wondered if Emily knew more about my husband than I ever would. The loneliness was suffocating. I'd walk through the house, touching the photos on the walls, the souvenirs from trips we'd taken, the gifts we'd given each other. Each one felt like a relic from another life, a life that no longer belonged to me. Sometimes I'd catch myself hoping Daniel would come to me, would confess everything, would beg for forgiveness. But he never did. He just kept living his double life, pretending nothing had changed, while I fell apart in silence. I started to question my own sanity. Maybe I was imagining things. Maybe I was the problem. The shame was overwhelming, a heavy, invisible weight I carried everywhere. I stopped eating, stopped caring about anything but the ache in my chest. But even in my darkest moments, a small, stubborn spark refused to die. I'd lost so much: my trust, my confidence, my sense of safety, but I wasn't done yet. Somewhere deep inside, I knew I couldn't let this be the end of my story. I couldn't let Daniel's lies define me, couldn't let my pain become my prison. I thought I'd lost everything, but I wasn't done yet. And as the days dragged on, that tiny spark began to grow, flickering in the darkness, reminding me that I still had a choice. I could give up, or I could fight for the truth for myself, for the woman I used to be, for the life I still deserved. It was a Tuesday afternoon when the phone rang, its shrill tone slicing through the heavy silence of the house. I almost didn't answer. I'd grown used to letting calls go to voicemail, to hiding from the world and the questions I couldn't bear to answer. But something in me, maybe that stubborn spark that refused to die, reached for the receiver. "Anna?" The voice was warm, familiar, and instantly soothing. It was Julia, my old college professor and mentor, the woman who'd once told me I could do anything if I just believed in myself. We hadn't spoken in months, but hearing her voice felt like a lifeline thrown into stormy waters. "Julia," I managed, my voice cracking. "Hi." She didn't waste time with small talk. "Rachel called me. She's worried about you. She said you've been going through something, and I just wanted to check in. Can I come over?" I hesitated, shame prickling at my skin. I didn't want anyone to see me like this, broken, lost, a shell of the woman I used to be. But Julia's kindness was impossible to refuse. "Okay," I whispered. "I'd like that." She arrived an hour later, arms full of groceries and a bouquet of sunflowers, my favorite. She bustled into the kitchen, filling the house with the scent of fresh bread and coffee, her presence a gentle reminder of better days. She didn't ask questions at first. She just sat with me, letting the silence settle, her hand resting on mine. Finally, she spoke. "Anna, I know you're hurting, but I also know you. You're stronger than you think. Tell me what happened." The words spilled out of me in a rush, everything I'd been holding in, every fear, every betrayal, every moment of doubt. Julia listened without judgment, her eyes kind and steady, her grip on my hand never wavering. When I finished, she squeezed my fingers, her voice firm. "You are not crazy. You are not overreacting. What Daniel did was wrong, and you have every right to feel hurt and angry. But you also have the right to fight for yourself. You don't have to accept this, Anna. You can choose what happens next." Her words were a balm, soothing the raw places inside me. For the first time in weeks, I felt seen, understood. Julia didn't try to minimize my pain or explain it away. She simply believed me, and that belief was enough to make me sit up a little straighter, to breathe a little deeper. She helped me make a plan, practical and clear. "You need to protect yourself," she said. "Start by gathering every piece of evidence you have: emails, bank statements, anything that proves what's been happening. If you need a lawyer, I know someone. And Anna, don't be afraid to lean on the people who love you. You don't have to do this alone." We spent the afternoon sorting through paperwork, making lists, organizing files. Julia's calm, methodical approach helped me focus, helped me see that I wasn't powerless. I could take action. I could reclaim control over my life, one small step at a time. As the sun set, painting the kitchen in golden light, Julia hugged me tight. "You are not alone," she whispered. "I'm here, every step of the way." After she left, I sat at the table, surrounded by stacks of evidence and a growing sense of determination. The despair that had threatened to swallow me whole began to recede, replaced by something fiercer, brighter. I wasn't just a victim. I was a woman who deserved the truth, who deserved respect, who deserved to be heard. With Julia's help, I found the courage to fight back. The next morning, I woke with a sense of purpose I hadn't felt in weeks. The fog of despair had lifted, replaced by a sharp, clear determination. Julia's words echoed in my mind. "You don't have to accept this. You can choose what happens next." I was done being a bystander in my own life. It was time to gather the truth, piece by piece, and prepare for the confrontation that would finally force Daniel to face what he'd done. I started with the bank statements Julia and I had already flagged. I combed through every transaction, highlighting the ones that didn't make sense: expensive dinners, hotel stays, cash withdrawals, and boutique purchases. I created a spreadsheet listing dates, amounts, and locations. The pattern was undeniable. Every Friday, like clockwork, money disappeared. I cross-referenced these with Daniel's calendar, noting every late meeting and client dinner. The overlap was chilling. Next, I turned to our shared computer. Daniel had always been careful, but not careful enough. I found a folder buried deep in the documents, innocuously labeled work expenses. Inside were scanned receipts, some legitimate, others clearly personal. There were charges for gifts, spa treatments, and even a weekend getaway to a resort I'd never heard of. The receipts were signed by Daniel, but the guest names included Emily's, sometimes even listed as Mrs. Carter. My hands shook as I printed each one, the evidence growing into a damning pile. I knew I needed more than just financial records. I needed proof of the emotional betrayal, the lies he'd told to keep me in the dark. I scrolled through his emails, searching for anything that might reveal the truth. Most were work-related, but a few stood out messages from Emily, marked confidential, discussing plans for dinners, events, and even a business trip that coincided with one of the hotel stays. The tone was always professional, but the frequency and familiarity spoke volumes. I took screenshots of every message, saving them to a secure folder Julia had helped me set up. I backed up everything to a flash drive just in case. I felt like a detective, piecing together a puzzle I never wanted to solve, but I needed more. I needed someone who could confirm what I suspected, someone who'd seen Daniel and Emily together outside the office. I thought of the receptionist, Emily, whose discomfort had been so obvious that day in the lobby. I decided to pay her a visit. I arrived at Daniel's office building just before lunch, my heart pounding. Emily looked up as I approached, her eyes widening in recognition. I offered a tentative smile. "Hi, Emily. Do you have a minute?" She hesitated, glancing around, then nodded. "Sure. Is everything okay?" I lowered my voice. "I just need to ask you something." Off the record. She bit her lip, then motioned for me to follow her to a quiet corner. "What is it?" I took a deep breath. "How long have Daniel and Emily been presenting themselves as husband and wife here?" She looked away, her cheeks flushing. "A while. Maybe 6 months? It's just, everyone thinks they're married. They act like it." "I'm sorry, Anna. I didn't know what to say." Her words stung, but I nodded. "Thank you for being honest. Has anyone else noticed? Has anyone ever questioned it?" She shook her head. "Not really. They're careful. But people talk. Some of the staff joke about it. I always thought it was strange, but I figured it was just for business." I thanked her, my suspicions confirmed. I left the building, my resolve hardening. I needed more voices, more proof. I called Julia, who suggested I speak to Daniel's colleagues, people who might have seen something, heard something, or been asked to cover for him. I reached out to Mark, a junior associate I'd met at a company picnic. He sounded nervous when I called, but agreed to meet for coffee. When I asked about Daniel and Emily, he hesitated, then sighed. "Look, Anna, I like Daniel. He's a good boss. But everyone knows about him and Emily. They're always together. People say they're more than just colleagues, but no one wants to get involved." "I'm sorry." His words were another piece of the puzzle, another confirmation that I wasn't imagining things. I thanked him, feeling both vindicated and heartbroken. I spent the next few days gathering everything I could, emails, receipts, testimonies, even photos from company events. Julia helped me organize it all into a binder, each section labeled and cross-referenced. It was meticulous, undeniable, and damning, but the hardest part was yet to come. I knew I had to confront Daniel, to lay everything out and demand the truth. I rehearsed what I would say, my hands trembling, as I imagined the look on his face when he realized he couldn't lie his way out of this. One evening, as I was sorting through the last of the evidence, I found something that made my blood run cold. It was an email from Daniel to Emily, sent late at night. The subject line was simple: us. The message was short, but it said everything I needed to know. "I don't know how much longer I can keep this up. Anna is starting to ask questions. I wish things were different." I stared at the screen, my heart pounding. There it was, the admission, the proof that Daniel's double life was more than just a business arrangement. He was tired of hiding, tired of lying, but too cowardly to face me with the truth. I printed the email, adding it to the binder. My hands were steady now, my mind clear. I was ready. I would not be gaslit, dismissed, or silenced. I had the truth, and I would use it. What I discovered would turn his world upside down. And for the first time in a long time, I felt powerful. I was no longer the woman waiting in the shadows. I was ready to step into the light and demand the respect and the answers I deserved. I waited until Friday evening, the day Daniel always came home late, the day the lies had stacked up week after week. The binder of evidence sat on the kitchen table, a silent witness to everything I'd uncovered. My heart thudded in my chest, but I felt strangely calm, as if all the pain and confusion had crystallized into a single, unbreakable resolve. Tonight, there would be no more hiding, no more pretending. Tonight, I would face Daniel and Emily with the truth. Daniel walked in just after 8, his tie loosened, his eyes tired. He paused when he saw me sitting at the table, the binder open in front of me. For a moment he looked like he might turn and walk right back out the door. "Anna," he said, forcing a smile. "You're up late." I didn't return his smile. "We need to talk, now." He hesitated, glancing at the binder, then at me. "Can it wait? I've had a long day." "No," I said, my voice steady. "It can't." He sighed, dropping his briefcase by the door. "What's this about?" I slid the binder toward him. "It's about the truth, Daniel. The truth you've been hiding from me for months." "Sit down." He sat, his hands folded tightly in his lap. I watched his eyes scan the pages, bank statements, emails, photos, testimonies. I saw the color drain from his face as he realized what I'd done. "I know everything," I said quietly. "The money, the apartment, the lies. I know about you and Emily. I know how you've let everyone at work believe she's your wife. I know you've built a life with her that you never even offered me." He opened his mouth, but I held up a hand. Don't insult me with more lies. I have proof, Daniel. I have everything." He looked away, his jaw clenched. "It's not what you think." I laughed, the sound sharp. "Isn't it? Because it looks exactly like what I think. You've been living a double life. You've betrayed me, not just with your body, but with your heart, your time, your loyalty. You let me believe I was crazy, that I was imagining things. But I wasn't. I was right." He buried his face in his hands. "Anna, I'm sorry. I never meant for it to go this far." I felt a surge of anger, hot and cleansing. "You never meant for me to find out, you mean? You never meant to get caught. But you did, and now you're going to face the consequences." Just then, the doorbell rang. I stood, my heart pounding. "That's Emily. I asked her to come." Daniel's head snapped up, panic in his eyes. "Anna, please." But I was already moving, opening the door to find Emily standing on the porch, her expression wary. She stepped inside, glancing between Daniel and me. "What's going on?" she asked, her voice tight. I gestured to the table. "Sit down, Emily. We're going to have an honest conversation for once." She hesitated, then sat, folding her arms across her chest. "I don't know what you think you know, Anna, but..." I cut her off. "I know enough. I know about the apartment. I know about the money. I know about the emails, the late nights, the lies. I know you've been pretending to be Daniel's wife at work. And I know you've both let me believe I was crazy for suspecting anything." Emily's face paled, but she held my gaze. "It wasn't supposed to be like this. It started as a business arrangement, but it became more," I finished for her. "Didn't it?" She looked away, her voice barely above a whisper. "Yes." Daniel reached for my hand, but I pulled away. "Don't. You don't get to comfort me." "Not now." He slumped in his chair, defeated. "Anna, I'm sorry. I was weak. I let things get out of control. I never wanted to hurt you." I stared at him, my anger giving way to something colder. "You didn't just hurt me. You destroyed the trust we built, the life we shared. You made me doubt myself, my sanity, my worth. Do you have any idea what that feels like?" He shook his head, tears in his eyes. "No, I'm sorry," Emily spoke up, her voice trembling. "Anna, I never meant to come between you. I thought Daniel was unhappy, that your marriage was over. I should have asked, but I didn't. I'm sorry." I looked at her, really looked at her, and saw the guilt, the regret. But it didn't change what had happened. You both made choices. You both lied. And now you both have to live with the consequences. I stood, my hands steady. "Here's what's going to happen. I'm done being the victim. I'm done letting you control the narrative. I have evidence of everything enough to ruin your careers, your reputations, your carefully constructed lives. I don't want revenge. I want the truth. I want my life back." Daniel looked up, fear in his eyes. "What are you going to do?" I met his gaze, unflinching. "I'm going to protect myself. I'm going to make sure you can't hurt me again. And I'm going to make sure everyone knows the truth." Emily swallowed hard. "Anna, please." I shook my head. "Don't. You made your choices. Now I'm making mine." The room was silent, the weight of my words settling over us like a shroud. For the first time, I felt powerful, in control. I wasn't the woman begging for answers anymore. I was the woman demanding justice. Daniel tried one last time. "Anna, can we fix this? Is there any way?" I cut him off, my voice firm. "No, you made your bed. Now you have to lie in it." I gathered the binder, tucking it under my arm. "I'll be in touch." Through my lawyer. I walked out of the room, my head held high, my heart pounding with adrenaline and grief. I didn't look back. I didn't need to. I'd said everything I needed to say, but the fallout was just beginning. The days after the confrontation felt like living through an earthquake's aftershocks. Everything familiar was suddenly unstable, every step uncertain. Daniel's world began to unravel almost immediately. Word spread quickly at his office. The truth, once hidden behind polite smiles and closed doors, was now impossible to ignore. The HR department launched an investigation. Emily was quietly put on leave, and Daniel was called into meeting after meeting, his reputation crumbling with every whispered conversation in the hallway. I watched from a distance, a strange mix of vindication and sorrow twisting inside me. I hadn't set out to destroy him, but the truth had a way of burning through everything in its path. Daniel tried to call, to text, to beg for forgiveness, but I ignored him. I'd said everything I needed to say. Now I had to focus on myself. The legal battles began almost immediately. I met with Julia's recommended attorney, a sharp, compassionate woman named Marissa, who listened to my story without judgment. She helped me gather the evidence, file the necessary paperwork, and protect my interests. The process was exhausting, endless forms, tense meetings, and the constant ache of seeing my marriage reduced to numbers and signatures. But with every step, I felt a little stronger, a little more in control. Daniel fought at first, trying to negotiate, to minimize, to salvage what he could. But the evidence was overwhelming. The financial records, the emails, the testimonies from his colleagues, there was no denying what he'd done. Eventually, he stopped fighting and started apologizing. But by then, it was too late. The damage was done. Friends and family reacted in waves. Some were shocked, some quietly admitted they'd always suspected something was off. A few distanced themselves, uncomfortable with the messiness of it all. But others rallied around me, offering support, meals, and a listening ear. I learned who my true friends were, and I clung to them like a lifeline. The house felt emptier than ever. I packed Daniel's things into boxes, each item a reminder of the life we'd built and lost. I cried over old photos, over the wedding dress I'd once dreamed of passing down, over the plans we'd made for a future that would never come. But with every box I sealed, I felt a little lighter, as if I was making space for something new. Financially, things were tight. Daniel's suspension from work meant the steady income I'd relied on was gone. I had to make hard choices, cutting expenses, selling things I no longer needed, even considering moving to a smaller place. But I refused to let fear dictate my future. I took on extra hours at work, leaned on Julia and my friends for advice, and reminded myself that I was capable, resourceful, and resilient. The hardest part was the loneliness. Nights were the worst, when the house was silent and the memories pressed in. I missed the comfort of routine, the illusion of safety. I missed the man I thought Daniel was, the life I thought we had. But I also knew that clinging to the past would only keep me trapped. I started therapy, determined to heal the wounds that ran deeper than I'd realized. I talked about the betrayal, the shame, the anger, and the fear. I learned to forgive myself for not seeing the signs, for trusting too easily, for loving someone who didn't deserve it. I learned that healing wasn't linear, that some days would be harder than others, but that every step forward mattered. As the weeks passed, a new order began to emerge from the chaos. I found comfort in small routines, morning walks, fresh flowers on the table, coffee with Julia. I started to dream again, to imagine a future that belonged to me alone. I realized that I was stronger than I'd ever given myself credit for, that I could survive heartbreak and come out the other side. But the scars remained, reminders of everything I'd lost. I wondered if I could ever truly rebuild after so much destruction, if I could ever trust again, if I could ever open my heart to someone new. The questions lingered, heavy and unresolved. Still, I refused to let fear win. I had faced the truth, survived the fallout, and begun to carve out a new life from the wreckage. The journey wasn't over, but for the first time, I believed that healing was possible. And as I looked around at the life I was slowly rebuilding, I knew that I was not defined by what had been broken, but by the strength it took to start again. In the quiet that followed the storm, I found myself standing at the edge of something new and terrifying, my own life, unshared, unfiltered, and entirely mine. At first, the silence felt like a punishment, a reminder of everything I'd lost. But slowly, Almost imperceptibly, it began to feel like a blank canvas, a space where I could begin again. I started small. Each morning, I made my bed, a simple act of order in a world that had felt so chaotic. I filled the house with fresh flowers, their colors bright against the pale walls. I opened the windows, letting in sunlight and the sound of birdsong, determined to let life back in, even if it was just in tiny, manageable pieces. Therapy became my anchor. I sat across from a gentle, wise woman named Dr. Patel, who listened without judgment as I poured out my grief, my anger, my confusion. She helped me untangle the knots of shame and self-doubt that Daniel's betrayal had left behind. She reminded me that healing wasn't about forgetting, but about learning to carry my scars with grace. Some days, I left her office feeling lighter, as if I'd set down a burden I'd been carrying for years. Other days, I cried all the way home, but even those tears felt like progress, a sign that I was finally letting myself feel, instead of just surviving. I made a conscious effort to care for my body, too. I started walking every morning, breathing in the crisp air, feeling my muscles stretch and strengthen. I cooked healthy meals, savoring the act of nourishing myself. I bought a new journal and filled its pages with hopes, fears, and dreams, some old, some startlingly new. I wrote letters to the woman I used to be, forgiving her for her mistakes, thanking her for her courage. Reaching out to friends and family was harder. I'd withdrawn so deeply during the worst of it that I worried I'd lost them for good. But when I called Rachel, she answered on the first ring, her voice warm and steady. We met for coffee, and she listened as I told her everything, her eyes shining with tears and pride. My sister came over with takeout and a bottle of wine, and we laughed until our sides ached, the way we used to when we were girls. Even my mother, who had once dismissed my pain, wrapped me in a hug and whispered, "I'm sorry." I should have listened. With every conversation, every shared meal, every moment of laughter, I felt the cracks in my heart begin to mend. I realized that I wasn't alone, that I was surrounded by people who loved me not for the role I played, but for the woman I was becoming. I started saying yes to new things. I took a pottery class, my hands clumsy but eager as I shaped lumps of clay into imperfect bowls. I joined a book club where I found comfort in stories of women who had survived and thrived. I volunteered at a local shelter, discovering a sense of purpose in helping others rebuild their lives. Slowly, my confidence returned. I looked in the mirror and saw not a victim, but a survivor, a woman who had faced heartbreak and chosen to rise. I learned to trust my instincts again, to listen to the quiet voice inside me that said, "You are enough." But even as hope blossomed, questions lingered. Could I ever trust again? Could I open my heart to someone new, or even to myself? Was I brave enough to love, not just another person, but the woman I was becoming? Some nights, those questions kept me awake, their answers just out of reach. But I reminded myself that healing wasn't a destination, it was a journey, one I was finally willing to take. I didn't have all the answers, but I had faith in my own resilience, in the strength I'd found in the ashes of my old life. I was rebuilding, piece by piece, day by day. And for the first time in a long time, I believed that I deserved happiness, not because I'd survived, but because I was learning to love myself enough to move on. Spring arrived quietly, painting the world in soft greens and hopeful pinks. I found myself waking up with a sense of anticipation, a gentle curiosity about what each day might bring. The pain of the past still lingered, but it no longer defined me. Instead, I felt a growing excitement, a sense that my life was finally, truly my own. I threw myself into my work, taking on new projects and responsibilities. For years, I'd let Daniel's career overshadow my own, always putting his needs first, always shrinking myself to fit the space he left for me. Now, I stepped forward with confidence, sharing my ideas in meetings, volunteering for leadership roles, and even mentoring a younger colleague who reminded me so much of myself. My boss noticed the change, and soon I was offered a promotion, something I'd never dared to dream of before. I accepted, feeling a surge of pride and possibility. Outside of work, I let myself explore the world again. I signed up for a painting class, my hands trembling with excitement as I dipped my brush into bright, bold colors. I joined a hiking group, discovering hidden trails and new friends who shared my love of the outdoors. I traveled to a nearby city for a weekend, wandering through art galleries and cozy cafes, savoring the freedom of making my own choices. One afternoon at a local coffee shop, I met someone new. His name was Alex, and he had kind eyes and a gentle laugh. We struck up a conversation about the book I was reading, and before I knew it, hours had passed. He didn't ask about my past, and I didn't offer it. Instead, we talked about music, travel, and the little joys of everyday life. When he asked if I'd like to meet again, I hesitated, old fears rising up, but then I remembered Julia's words. "You deserve happiness, Anna. Don't let fear keep you from living." So I said yes. Our first few dates were simple walks in the park, shared meals, laughter that felt easy and unforced. I was honest with him about my scars, about the journey I was still on. He listened, never pushing, always patient. For the first time, I felt seen not as someone broken, but as someone brave. But the most important relationship I rebuilt was the one with myself. I learned to enjoy my own company, to savor quiet mornings with a cup of tea and a good book, to celebrate my own victories, no matter how small. I filled my home with things that brought me joy, soft blankets, scented candles, art that made me smile. I created new rituals, Sunday morning pancakes, Friday night movies, long baths with music playing softly in the background. I realized that independence wasn't about being alone, it was about choosing myself, about honoring my needs and desires. I no longer waited for someone else to give me permission to be happy. I gave that to myself every single day. As the months passed, I found myself looking back less and less. The old life, the one defined by Daniel's lies and my own self-doubt, felt distant, like a story I'd once read but no longer lived. In its place was something new, a life built on honesty, courage, and hope. Still, as much as I'd grown, I knew my journey wasn't quite finished. There was one last thing I needed to do, one final step, to truly close the door on the past and step fully into the future I was creating for myself. It happened on a bright Saturday morning, the kind that used to mean lazy breakfasts and shared plans for the weekend. I was at the farmer's market, arms full of fresh flowers and ripe peaches, when I saw Daniel across the street. He looked older, thinner, weighed down by the consequences of his choices. For a moment I considered turning away, slipping into the crowd and letting the past stay buried. But I realized I didn't want to hide anymore. I was ready to face him, not as the woman he'd betrayed, but as the woman I'd become. He noticed me and hesitated, uncertainty flickering in his eyes. I walked over, my heart steady, my head high. "Hello, Daniel," I said, my voice calm and clear. He managed a weak smile. "Anna, you look well." "I am well," I replied, and I meant it. "I'm rebuilding my life. I'm happy." He nodded, his gaze dropping to the flowers in my arms. "I wanted to call you." "To explain? To apologize again?" I shook my head gently. "You don't owe me anything more, Daniel. I've heard all the apologies. I've spent enough time trying to understand why you did what you did. But I'm done letting your choices define me." He looked up, pain and regret etched into his face. "I never wanted to hurt you. I lost everything." I met his eyes, steady and unflinching. "You lost my trust. You lost the life we built together. But I didn't lose myself. Not forever. I found her again, and I'm not letting her go." He swallowed, searching for words. "I hope you can forgive me someday." "I already have," I said softly. "Not for you, but for me. I needed to let go of the anger to move forward. I hope you find your own peace, Daniel. But I'm not responsible for your healing. I'm only responsible for mine." He nodded, a tear slipping down his cheek. "You're stronger than I ever realized." I smiled, feeling the truth of it settle in my bones. "I am, and I'm setting boundaries now. We'll handle what's left, divorce, finances, whatever else, through our lawyers. I don't want any more contact beyond what's necessary. My life is my own now." He opened his mouth to protest, but I held up a hand. "This isn't about punishing you. It's about protecting myself. I wish you well, Daniel, truly, but this is goodbye." For a moment, we stood in silence, the noise of the market swirling around us. I felt a sense of closure, a quiet strength that came from knowing I was no longer trapped by his betrayal. I was free. As I turned to leave, I felt lighter than I had in years. This time, I was in control. Looking back, it's hard to believe how much my life has changed. There were days when I thought the pain would swallow me whole, when I couldn't imagine ever feeling whole or hopeful again. But here I am, standing on the other side of heartbreak, stronger and more certain of myself than I ever thought possible. If you're listening to my story, maybe you've been where I was lost, betrayed, questioning your own worth. Maybe you've felt the sting of someone else's lies, the ache of trust broken, the loneliness that follows when the world you built crumbles overnight. If so, I want you to know, you are not alone. For a long time, I blamed myself. I wondered what I could have done differently, how I could have missed the signs. I let shame and self-doubt take root, convincing myself that I was somehow responsible for Daniel's choices. But the truth is, his betrayal was never about me. It was about his own fears, his own weaknesses. I learned that I am not defined by someone else's actions. I am defined by how I choose to respond, how I choose to heal. Healing wasn't easy. It wasn't quick. There were setbacks and sleepless nights, moments when I wanted to give up. But every time I picked myself up, every time I chose to keep going, I grew a little stronger. I learned to set boundaries, to protect my heart, to trust my instincts. I learned that it's okay to ask for help, to lean on friends and family, to seek support when you need it. Most importantly, I learned to love myself again. I learned to forgive myself for trusting, for hoping, for believing in love. I realized that vulnerability isn't weakness, it's courage. It's the willingness to open your heart, even when you know it might get broken. And it's the strength to pick up the pieces and start again. If you're in the middle of your own storm, please remember, you are worthy of love, respect, and happiness. You are not broken, no matter how much it feels that way. You have the power to rebuild, to create a life that is beautiful and true. It won't happen overnight, and it won't always be easy, but every step you take is a victory. Don't let anyone else's betrayal steal your light. Don't let fear keep you from dreaming, from loving, from living fully. You are stronger than you know, braver than you believe, and more deserving than you realize. If my story resonates with you, I hope you'll share your own. Leave a comment, reach out, let someone know they're not alone. We heal by telling our stories, by lifting each other up, by reminding one another that even in our darkest moments, there is hope. If you've ever felt betrayed, you're not alone. And if you're searching for strength, know that it's already inside you waiting to be claimed. One day at a time. A year has passed since the day my world fell apart. And as I sit by my window, sunlight streaming across the pages of my journal, I marvel at how far I've come. The pain that once felt endless has softened, replaced by a quiet gratitude for the lessons I never wanted but so desperately needed. My life is not what I once imagined, but in so many ways, it's better. I wake up each morning with a sense of peace, no longer haunted by questions or regrets. My days are filled with simple joys, the laughter of friends over dinner, the satisfaction of a project completed at work, the comfort of a home that feels truly mine. I've learned to savor the present, to let go of the need for certainty, and to trust that I am exactly where I'm meant to be. Alex and I still see each other, but there's no rush, no pressure. We're two people learning to love gently, to honor our own journeys while sharing new experiences. Whether our paths remain intertwined or eventually diverge, I know I'll be okay. I've discovered that my happiness doesn't depend on anyone else. It comes from within, from the choices I make every day to honor myself. I travel more now, sometimes with friends, sometimes alone. I've stood on mountaintops and watched the sunrise, wandered through bustling markets in cities I'd never seen, and found beauty in places I never expected. Each adventure reminds me that the world is wide and full of possibility, and that I am free to explore it on my own terms. The woman I see in the mirror is not the same one who once doubted her worth. She is stronger, wiser, and unafraid to speak her truth. She knows that life will bring challenges, that hearts can break and dreams can change. But she also knows that she has the power to begin again, no matter how many times it takes. If you're listening to this, wondering if you'll ever feel whole again. I promise you, healing is possible. Joy is possible. A new chapter is always waiting, just beyond the pain. No matter how dark it gets, you can write your own ending. And as I close my journal and step out into the sunlight, I do so with hope, with confidence, and with the unshakable belief that the best is yet to come.